You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling. I'm Mandy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is
The Coop. We have our final chapter and talk about dumbing us down today.
Final countdown.
Yep, it's part 6, believe it or not. And we're covering chapter 5 and some of the bonus and the afterword that Gatto wrote. Mm-hmm. But before we dive in, Mandy, what's your scoop on the Coop?
Okay, well, for those watching the YouTube, we're in a totally different location here because we got bunnies and everything in the room got moved around a little bit. So that's been exciting. But that's not even my scoop.
Yeah.
My scoop is Mark Rober. Have you ever heard of him? He's a YouTube channel guy.
Robert?
Oh, maybe it's Robert.
That sounds familiar.
But he is a YouTube phenomenon.
Okay.
But he does physics stuff.
Oh.
And he's funny, and you don't even know you're watching physics. Like he does the elephant volcanoes.
Okay, yeah, the
and
elephant
things.
toothpaste.
Yeah, he does that kind of stuff. But he's the one who broke the world record, and people try and imitate him and stuff. But the coolest thing was, so this morning we spent about an hour and a half watching him. He made squirrel obstacle courses because he realized how smart squirrels are. So he created all these obstacle courses to see the physics of what they could do, and he talked about how they parachute out when they're falling.
Yeah.
So the kids were fascinated. So I'm like,
so cool.
I think we just found our new YouTube channel guy,
right?
Because he talks about the physics of things. I mean, he's not all into the equations, but it at least
that's fine.
Increases their curiosity. Yeah. They see what things are possible. So it was really fun just sitting there and watching all these. And he has 100 videos. So we've only broken into 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But
so there's more.
Yeah, so it's fun. So that's my scoop.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We ended up having to flex our homeschooling schedule because our days were filled with birthday celebrations back in February, and then we had our field trip stacked. Mm-hmm. And so while, I don't necessarily believe in pushing through school, I also wanted to be in the right place in our curriculum because we are doing the California history. And so we had our first mission and we had finished at Explorers when we all went to Cabrillo. And so I was like, I know it's a Sunday. It was Super Bowl Sunday. And I said, we're going to just power through.
Yeah.
We only have 2 pages to kind of read through and discuss. I'm not even diving into the missions. I just want to get us up to the point where we talk about the beginnings of the mission.
Well, it's nice to have a consistency in what you're learning. And so sometimes when I find that if I take 1 or 2 weeks break of a unit study, you kind of okay, where were we? Right. And you kind of lose momentum.
Right.
And like we've always said, school is, we're not slaves to a schedule. No. And so Sunday can be a wonderful time to talk about how awesome California history is.
And I talked about it with my daughter. I asked her if she was interested in the Super Bowl. I said, I only need 30 minutes of your time. Can you give that to me so that we can get where we want to go and not feel overwhelmed by it? Then now we have a whole month to go through the missions because we have the field trip spanning that long. And I like to keep our curriculum up to what we're doing and visiting. So it's all really relevant.
And we have behind us this beautiful California missions map that we got at the San Diego mission.
Yeah, I framed mine.
I know. I was going to. I just I don't have
it's
a frame
weird
for it.
size.
Yeah,
it's not like it's not a standard size. But anywho, that's our scoops.
Sounds good.
Yes. Okay. So we have chapter 5 here. Chapter 5 was in part a lesson in economics. Gatto discusses free markets and centralization, and then finishes the chapter with what he deems to be the 2 official ways of looking at the state of education. So
it was a really interesting chapter.
Yeah, it was. So first, let's dive into the economics.
Okay.
Gatto begins the chapter by sharing some history of colonial New England, the first Puritan church and its evolution. But we felt it was important to note that his history and theology on the church and their beliefs was not fully accurate. And this was something that you caught. I read right past it and was just jumping into why he was using it as a comparison. I didn't notice the content as much as you did, and
Yeah.
it really stuck out to you because your husband is a historian.
Yeah. And Gatto's not a historian,
No.
so you can't really expect a historian level
Right.
Academic,
Right.
Essay here. But so if it does interest you, I would definitely not utilize Gatto's history on it, and just check out some church historians.
Right. Okay. So if you are interested in more on church history, your husband had a recommendation.
Yeah. It's a book called A History of Christianity in the United States and Canada by Mark Knoll.
Perfect. So that's our caveat to the chapter. And then we're going to dive back into the context. So Gatto is talking about economics, and then he's going to then apply this to the idea of schools. And so he's introducing two big terms through his conversation about this early church in New England. And actually, I started to wonder if he was really talking about it because of what he wrote this chapter for. He originally used this content as a talk, eventually one of the most popular arrows in my peripatetic
Wow.
speaker's quiver.
Big word. Oh my goodness.
I said it right. Began life in a slightly altered form as an essay in the Maine Scholar.
Maine as in the state.
So I'm wondering if that was why he was doing this. Is
yeah,
like
because
trying to speak
people
to
would
those
connect
people.
to it. Yeah.
So he brings up two big terms: congregational principle and dialectical thinking. And so the congregational principle emphasizes the right and responsibility of each properly organized congregation to determine its own affairs without having to submit these decisions to the judgment of any higher human authority outside of that congregation.
Yeah.
And as such, it eliminated bishops and presbyteries. So that was kind of the early Congregationalists in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And he's using this term and this idea to compare it to economics. And then dialectical thinking refers to the ability to view issues from multiple perspectives and to arrive at the most economical and reasonable reconciliation of seemingly contradictory information and postures.
That's a lot of big words.
It is. And so what he's saying is that the congregational procedure was dialectical down to its roots. And so he's saying that these two big ideas are really important, and he uses the early church to show its successfulness in localization. So now let me contrast what he was using in economics terms. So he was saying that centralization was the problem. When the churches had to submit to a higher authority outside of their own congregation, it was not recognizing what that congregation was facing.
It's kind of like why there was the American Revolution.
Exactly.
Because they're having to answer to someone across the sea.
They don't know what their hardships are.
Yeah.
They don't know what the people need.
Right.
And so localization was what really worked for the Congregationalists. And then he's talking about monopolies, right? So then when you have centralization, inevitably you're going to start getting these monopolies because they're going to start cookie cuttering, they're going to take over everything, and there's only going to be one higher authority. He talked about the pyramid idea, and so there's all the people at the bottom, and then it all refers up and up and up to a singular point. But he contrasts it with the free market model, and then he references some classical economists, Adam Smith and David Ricardo, which I remember studying in college as an economics major back in the day. But the classical economists focused on economic freedom and free competition. So what Gatto was saying in the Congregationalist history was that they eventually would adapt to the changing people they were serving, or when people were leaving the congregation to go be better served somewhere else, they had to adapt. They would adapt or die.
Well, and they had a choice. Right. Like the next place they went to wasn't going to be the exact same thing.
Exactly. So Gatto believes that looking deeply into what had worked economically in colonial New England could be the solution, or a solution, to our school problem. So he then wants to talk about the two official ways to view the state of education. So this is what he believes are the two official ways that most people would view education.
Okay.
The first is that it's an engineering problem. There's a right and a wrong way. There are not individual possibilities.
And he's saying that's bad.
Yes. Well, he's not saying that this is a solution or even specifically the actual
this is
problem.
how it is right now.
This is how it is, and this is how most people interpret the problem.
This is the equation. If you follow this equation,
right,
this is what is the right way. And then if you don't follow the equation, this is the wrong way.
Right. We're not going to look at this as an individual. Like in LA, this could work for these kids in this school district, but in New York, it would need to be like this. In the suburbs of the South, it should be like this.
So that's like shutting down the charter schools who
Exactly.
actually approach it in a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an engineering problem. Like,
Right.
nope, cut that out because we can't have individualized
critical
education.
path. Yeah.
And then the second way he believes that people view the state of education is in searching for a villain. I liked this one because that's always the truth, isn't it?
Totally.
Everyone's always pointing the blame somewhere else.
Yeah.
At teachers, at the curriculum is the problem. The politicians are the problem.
And then they're trying to fix all these little problems
Right.
without looking at the systemic problem.
And it's crazy because the one that I hear now is that the parents are the problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, why do you think they're taking parenting out of the hands of parents?
Right. It gets me, but especially with all the kids who came home and then there were rules about parents couldn't listen to the Zoom.
I know. Well, I've heard not many, but a number of school leaders personally say, parents don't know.
Right.
What do parents know? And it's like, only their child.
Right. Yeah. And our own experience. Most of us were publicly educated as well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So he then goes into talking about solutions, and there are bad solutions. Of these are the parade of profit seekers. He talks about the immense number of different types of industries that are trying to solve the problem. There's analysts. We're paying for consultants, for researchers, for academic houses, testing corporations, teachers' colleges, state departments.
Oh yeah, because that's what I was mentioning earlier. Yeah. Because you have all these different elements. Now you're hiring new elements, adding to the machine.
Yep.
To fix parts of the machine
right.
that you think are causing the break.
Yeah, this is the engineering problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If we did this better, then all of this would just work.
Right.
So you're solving this problem.
If you address the bullies, then everybody would be happy.
Right.
And have social emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
Sure.
And he called them all parasitic growths of the government monopoly over the school concept.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good too, because he's very good with his words.
He is.
And it hits hard, but he's not wrong.
No, I know.
And then he said the other bad solution is always looking for the easy way out. This is the dark side of the American dream, he calls it. And it's really true. Advertisers prey on those looking for the quick fix.
Yeah,
look at the state of commercialism today.
Yeah.
We're always thinking about that thing that can solve our problems. Oh, if I just had this better thing, and look at our lives.
Yeah.
And I wish I weren't this way, but
I know.
Even it's just ingrained subconsciously into us that there's a solution to everything. Find it and get out of this
problem. The first solution.
Right, the first easy one. Yeah, don't do the hard thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he talks about school reform, which he says, school reform to most of us is an engineer reaching for the right wrench, or Perry Mason finding the clue he needs to nail the bad guy.
That's funny.
So he talks about school reform just being a bad solution as well. It's not really fixing the problem.
No, because it's still school.
Right. So he says these don't work because education shouldn't be one size fits all. Gatto says the Congregationalists would have recognized this right away.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not that's true, I can't say. I can't speak for the Congregationalists.
Well, maybe because he's saying the Congregationalists knew that they needed what was pertinent to them in their situation.
Exactly.
And then in a different region, they need something different.
Exactly. So that was how they intended to operate. And so hopefully they would have recognized a problem like this and been able to tear it down and, fix it. But that's not what we're doing, that's for sure. And so then the real question by the end, Gatto is wondering, is there a solution? And he says, turn your back on national solutions and towards communities of families as successful laboratories.
Cool.
And so all of this is really important. He kind of is pulling in from all of his previous chapters a little bit here, so some of this will be familiar from other places. He says the ever popular "know thyself," which is true. You know, we talk about having a mission statement for our homeschooling. When you know what's important to you, you have your goals and you have your foundation as a family for education. Know that.
Yeah.
And don't compromise it.
Yeah.
You know, don't be willing to just take that thing over there because it's easier.
Right.
Do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Good fences make good neighbors. We talked about this in the previous episode. You know, he was calling for community, but he also said you have to look at the family first. And centralization, our government and the monopolies have totally torn apart our ability to really just stay focused on our family. I know we read in the book, and you like this particular area, about how the family has just been torn apart, or the need for women to be able to work, the desire for women to work then turned into the need for women to work because of how it completely turned the wage situation. And
it's the
money.
unintended consequence of, yes, we want freedom for women to make choices.
Right.
But now there's still not a choice.
Right.
Because now in most households, women or both partners or spouses have to work.
Right.
It's so hard to have a single income home now and give people the choice to stay home with their child.
Gatto was talking about the change in the cost of living, how you in the 50s could live on a single income, typically from a male, the husband of the family, and that was enough to be middle class. And now you need typically two working parents, two working adults to be middle class, hopefully.
And that's why so many people feel like they can't homeschool because they've already built their life on two incomes.
Right. And it certainly takes sacrifice. You know, I mean, I work part-time because it just makes living a little bit more comfortable for us, and it works. If it didn't work, we would probably make the sacrifice because homeschooling is non-negotiable.
Yeah, we've talked about a number of times, do we need to sell this house?
Right. Exactly.
So that we can maintain single income family life and have freedom still to like maybe take a road trip every now and then.
I know. It's just a road trip. I'm not asking for anything fancy.
Yeah. As much as I want to go to Europe.
Right, but with the cost of gas at $5 a gallon.
I know. Yeah.
It costs, we all know. So he continues on with discussing his possible solutions and looking towards communities and families by saying you need to recognize, respect, understand, appreciate, and learn from each other's differences. So the more closed off we get, the further away we get from this idea of community. You know, we're just breaking into these like awful...
Well, and the school keeps trying to be this community, which we talked about last time. It's a pseudo community. It's a fake one. And then they wonder why mental health in children is so low.
Right. Absolutely. He says, encourage and underwrite experimentation. Trust children and families to know what's best for themselves.
Well, that's an original thought these days.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I might know what's best for my kids.
Yeah. I mean, the whole takes a village is, we use that a lot. Oh, it takes a village because our co-op or us moms are helping each other. But on the other hand, it doesn't take a village. It actually takes good parents.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think that you have to define what the village is. The village is not the neighbors that I don't know.
Right.
The village is my family, an extended family, especially those that, you know, are supportive and have those same values, and we have that community in that true sense. And then there's the extended friend family, you know, our co-op, for instance.
Yeah.
They have become our
That's
village.
true.
Like,
I
feel like
that.
I could lean on any one of you in the co-op and feel supported and feel like you would honor anything that I might do different than you for my kids. You're not going to go, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing. Her kids should be doing it this way.
And
you would
who you are and who your child is.
Exactly.
And that just happened the other day when my daughter's struggling with her teacher, and she's only 7, and another mom from our co-op, she was like, you need to find out, what does she want to do?
Right.
What does she want to do? And I'm like, yes, that's a good reminder, and you're helping me with that too. It's like that, just remembering, like, wait, what does she actually want to do?
Right. Right, because there's always this desire to push through and to, help your kids do hard things. And then there's also is she just not interested?
Yeah.
And what do you want to push?
Yeah.
Is this that important to you?
Yeah, and having that community of people who know you and know your child. So I love what you're saying. The village is who we choose the village to be.
Right.
Not who the government chooses for the village to be.
Exactly. Gatto says that teaching should be decertified. Now that's a crazy thought.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I look at all the successful homeschooling moms, most of whom aren't certified teachers.
Right.
We are resourceful. We know how to find what we need. I'm not teaching from my own brain everything that I want my kid to know.
Well, when you think about it, how many jobs do people have certifications for?
Exactly.
It's mostly in education that people have certifications for. And it can help. Like if you're in business and you get an MBA, it might help you. It might not.
Right.
But so it's through the interview and connecting with people that like this person is a good educator. I don't care what a piece of paper says.
Right.
This person will be resourceful and they'll figure it out. And the problem with certification is it tells these parents, I can't teach my child because I'm not certified.
Right. And then on the flip side of that too, I think that those that are certified feel like that's what they have to do. That's what they have to teach. They have to do what their certification gave them instead of teaching the children they have.
Yeah.
Your bunnies in here.
I know. They're thumping. They're expressing their dominance.
They're probably wondering why we're so loud. But I think that the certification really is a way of separating us from them, and then they're not teaching ours.
Yeah.
They're just teaching this one way, and that's, again, we've talked about this before. That is not in any way to belittle teachers, because I think there are so many amazing teachers out there who really strive to do that. It's
Definitely.
the model that they're stuck in.
And
what can you do with 25 kids?
If you're going to have 25 kids with all different learning styles, with all different home cultures and all that, then of course you need some training.
Right.
Because they all have different special needs and different gifts, and you're having to deal with 25.
Right.
So I get why you need some special training for that, and discipline, and where you are, like the high risk students and the vulnerable students. Yeah,
Absolutely.
you're going to need some extra like instinct even.
Right. And you know who I think would teach them best? People from their communities who know what they're going through, who know what they live through. And it's not a segregational concept. It's they can best be prepared to meet those students where they are and help them succeed in whatever capacity that means.
Yeah, I agree.
And it goes back to the idea of the one-room schoolhouse.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time, of how neat that would have been. Jane Eyre is my favorite book. And I think all the time about the one-room schoolhouse, from that era. So yes, Gatto says teaching should be decertified. And I mean, you and I couldn't agree more, I think, but it goes beyond that. It should be decertified and the whole model turned upside down. And schooling should just look a lot different than it does at the moment.
And then those teachers who are so gifted to teach would have more freedom.
Right.
To educate in the way that fits the current community that they're in.
And to give of themselves, because surely each of those teachers is particularly gifted in one area.
Yeah, and have passions.
And they can't teach that alone.
Right.
And not that you would want it to only be one subject per se, but, it would just be nice for the teachers to actually give more of themselves as a unique individual in our community.
Well, like I have said a ton, I'd love to be a kindergarten teacher. Like, I'd love to do that. And my husband, who used to work for a educational publisher, he's like, no, you would not, because you have to go in line with all the other kindergarten teachers.
Right.
And you have to stay within like a couple weeks of each other. Like, and you all have to teach the same things. So you would have no autonomy. You wouldn't get to use the curriculum that you think is the best curriculum.
All you can actually bring in is your personality.
Yeah.
And then how much fun are you really going to have?
Yeah. So those poor teachers who have so much to give are stifled.
Totally.
Yeah.
I agree. And then his final point here for his question of, is there a solution, is you need to encourage competition and free market model. And so that's
that
huge.
schools?
That's the school choice idea.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, yeah.
schools should be able to govern themselves. Again, going back to the idea of being able to teach the community that they are in, not worried about keeping up with the community 10 miles over. You know, teach the kids that you have and allow them to go to a better fit.
Yeah.
If kids really should be somewhere else or desire a different kind, like the STEM schools are amazing.
Yeah.
If your kid is really into STEM and they want all of that kind of education, they should be free to go there.
Yeah.
You know, and not have to make it a big deal to leave the school that they're at to do that. And then likewise, an art school.
Yeah.
Why can't your kid go to a performing arts school if that's what their preference is?
Yeah.
They'll get math and English in too, but
Yeah,
they're going to
totally.
learn amazing things and be passionate and then hopefully be great contributors to society because they're happy.
Yeah. Exactly.
Happy and well-rounded. Yeah, so he said that the American solution to the great school nightmare would be these things, right? So the American solution, the idea of, you know, what we went through in the revolution, like you can't control us, you know, you don't know what we're doing, the localization, that is what he's calling the American solution. And then that would be the solution to our education.
Well, and private schools used to have not require any certification or anything, but then to get their WASC accreditation, like the Western Association, I don't even know what it says, but WASC is like a major accreditor. To have that, they have to have a certain percentage of their teachers credentialed, which I believe is like pretty high, like 80 to 90%.
Right. So then even private schools are no longer autonomous.
Right.
You know, that's, again, they got pulled into this centralized system. It's monopoly. That's why Gatto calls them monopoly government schools all
And they
the time.
believe they have to be accredited because the colleges, I guess, are communicating that, I'm guessing. But here's the thing, homeschoolers aren't accredited and they're letting in homeschoolers. So I wish private schools would kind of stand up more for like, we don't need to be accredited.
Right. But maybe if they want their students to be able to get funding, is that
maybe, I don't know. But there's something that goes along with the accreditation, like, oh, we're an accredited school.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, you put that on all your flyers.
Yeah. So that kind of concludes chapter 5, unless you have anything sort of left over.
No.
And then the bonus chapter is actually the prologue to Gatto's other book, Weapons of Mass Instruction. So we actually aren't going to really dive into this, just because that's a different book and it's for another time.
And it looks really good, actually.
Yeah, it looks really good.
I underlined and starred a lot of things.
Yeah.
So if you like Dumbing Us Down, or if you like this discussion and you don't feel a need to read Dumbing Us Down because we have fully
discussed it,
quote
by quote.
Yeah. Try, what's it called? Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really
clever
great title.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know that we'll do another Gatto book on here, but if we're still doing this in 10 years, why not?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then our concluding thoughts here.
Yeah.
Overall, Gatto uses his previous speeches and papers
getting to you.
to build a case against the government schooling monopoly. He poses several ways the typical solutions are not enough, and that we need radical change. In the final chapter, he offers an economic solution to the problem, which is the decentralization of education. And then we thought a great way to kind of conclude this book would be to ask a couple questions.
Sounds great.
Which would be, who would we recommend this book to? So, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
The should I homeschool crowd.
Oh, yeah.
Because I feel like if someone were to even read chapter 1, I think that's all they need to read. They read chapter 1 and it's the 7, what does he say? These are the things I teach. These are things you pay me to teach. Make of them what you will. So he teaches confusion, class position, indifference, emotional dependency, intellectual dependency, provisional self-esteem, and one can't hide. And then he ends the speech by saying, school is a 12-year jail sentence where bad habits are the only curriculum truly learned. I teach school and win awards doing it. I should know. And I feel like
impactful.
It is. And I feel like someone who's wondering if they should homeschool or not, if they just read chapter 1 or listen to chapter 1 for this podcast, which is part 2 of this book club, they would definitely, it would give them something to think about.
Yeah, I agree. And then for those who are wondering what we mean by the should I homeschool, that was episode 76. And so we kind of answered these two questions. Could I homeschool and should I? Yeah. And so this is really geared towards that should I crowd, because it's a great way to really rethink the public schools, because it's really easy, and we do this a lot even on our podcast. One time we'll speak really strongly against the public schools, especially when we're reading this book. Yeah, right. And then other times we're like, well, it wasn't so bad. We went through it.
I thrived in it. Right.
But ultimately we don't agree with it.
Yeah. And it's about having a balanced view, like seeing that there are good things that can come out of it. But we are making this choice to homeschool for a reason.
Right.
And this only solidifies it. So even if I was thinking like, oh, maybe in a couple years for sports, just reading this book reminds me, absolutely not.
Right. It's not worth the sacrifice.
No.
Yeah. And then the other group that we would recommend this to is for current homeschoolers.
Yeah.
Particularly in all of our tendencies to school at home.
I know. It's so hard because it is nice to work like a machine, to have your checklist, to go from one subject to the next, to the next, to the next, with 2 or 3 hours in a row. That would be school at home.
Right.
But even if you just put in bigger breaks and let them choose some, then you've already fought the battle against school at home.
Even way back at the beginning of this episode, when I was sharing my scoop and how we schooled on Sunday, it made me feel guilty of school at home, even though that wasn't the point of it. The point was because we were doing hands-on learning and I wanted us to be prepared for it.
Right.
But even still, there's something about being so pushy that makes it feel like school at home.
But the mere fact that you're educating and living life together and preparing for an event that was happening on Wednesday, and you had a goal, and you had total control over that goal.
I did, yeah.
So
I wasn't,
and that's what you knew would work best in the schedule, because your Tuesdays are filled up. You know, so in order to not be rushed, which is the school at home model,
right?
You said, hey, and you gave your daughter the reasons why.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah,
thank you. I feel better.
Yeah,
but I think we all have our moments where we're like, oh my goodness, I just was the school to my kid. This is not what I homeschool for. This is not what I believe in. And so I think that this book is really great reminder to just completely work on ditching that mindset.
Yeah, just like Sarah McKenzie says in Teaching from Rest, she says, we don't need to be a slave to homeschool.
No.
I mean, to curriculum. Yeah, you don't need to be a slave to curriculum. The curriculum is just a tool.
Right.
And so as long as you kind of flip it like that, you can still do all the subjects, still do your curriculum, but see it as you are autonomous, you are sovereign in accordance with your child's education.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to answer to anyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to say about this book?
So yeah, that first chapter was just really impactful.
Totally.
So, and then my big takeaway was just, remembering my own mission in homeschooling and
definitely
why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right. Just, he's not talking to us in any of this book. He's talking to fellow educators primarily.
Yeah.
But just to be the people that he's upholding here, saying, be these people. I'm like, I want to be these people. Yeah. I am that mom. I am those people who are family, oriented. You know, everything is family centric. And I love that. And so it's just reaffirming.
Yeah. All right. So should we do our Coop Q A,
where we answer your questions? The question is, do you do testing? And should homeschoolers be testing?
Ooh, what do you think, Jessie?
Well, I said yes, we both do testing because we're part of a public school, the Independent Study Charter School, which requires students to take state testing in order to receive its funding. Yeah. And so since we like to benefit from the funding at this point in time, we have to comply with the testing unless we had a really valid reason.
I mean, there's an opt-out, but why would I? I mean,
I don't feel good about opting out.
Yeah, when I'm getting the benefits of it.
Right. And my child personally doesn't struggle with the testing. It doesn't bother
I know.
her.
One of mine loves it. Like, she's like, can't wait. She keeps asking when it's happening. And then one of mine, he's in tears about it. But I see it as a way to teach him these skills since he'll need them later on.
Definitely. Now, if we didn't homeschool through a public charter, would you even bother? Like,
no.
So I think that in general senses, we're not anti-testing. I'm more anti-state testing than anything else. And so if we weren't a part of a charter, I would in no way want to take anything that's even equivalent to the state testing. I don't care where my kid measures with other kids that. Yeah. I would only be testing for her own knowledge, for anything I felt was important for her to have comprehensive understanding of. And so, I just feel like the testing doesn't provide us with anything, other than comparison and competition. And so then what about the more general question, should homeschoolers test? And so my simple answer was no. It should be a choice each family gets to make for themselves. Definitely. If you want to, absolutely. But should you?
Yeah.
I say no.
If your kid is wanting to, like if your kid is in high school, let's say, and wanting to pursue a certain occupation that would require a lot of testing to get into it, like med school or something, or law school, then yes, teach them testing skills. Do the SAT Princeton Review Prep test just so they can learn test taking skills, and how to fit a lot of questions in a short period of time. But if they're gonna go be an artist or a photographer, there's really no reason.
And if they need to be tested on something, they probably will be okay.
Yeah. They'll figure it out.
Thanks for listening. We love your support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, and share our podcast with your friends who need a little community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.